Long before transformers, we already had machines that could guess your next word. Your phone's autocomplete, the earliest speech recognition, the very first translation systems, they all leaned on the same simple statistical idea. A language model assigns probabilities to sequences of words, and from that it predicts what comes next. The classic, foundational way to do exactly that is the N-gram model, the conceptual ancestor of today's large language models. Today we're breaking down how it works and where it hits its limits. Let's start with the central trade-off because it explains the whole design. Ideally, you'd predict the next word using the entire history that came before it. But that's hopeless in practice. Real sentences are long and endlessly varied, so most full histories have simply never appeared in your training text. With nothing to count, you have no way to estimate the probability, and the model just stalls. So the model makes a clever bargain called the Markov assumption. Instead of the whole history, it looks at only the previous few words. A bigram uses just the one word before, a trigram uses the two before, and suddenly the histories are short enough that you actually see them often enough to count. You trade some memory for something you can estimate. Now let's follow how you actually build one of these models, step by step. First, you slide a window across a big pile of text. Move word by word through the corpus, and at each position grab the short chunk sitting inside the window, maybe 2 or 3 words at a time. That sliding window is what gives the model its name. Then you simply count. Tally how often each short word sequence occurs across everything you've seen. How many times does New York show up? And of those, how many times is it followed by city? Raw frequency is all the raw material you need. Next, you turn those tallies into predictions. The probability of a word given its short history is just its count divided by the count of that history. So the chance of city after New York is how often that pair appeared over how often New York appeared alone. Finally, you smooth. Many perfectly valid sequences never showed up in your training text, and you really can't hand them a probability of 0, or the model would choke the moment it meets them. So methods like Nesernay shave off a little probability mass and hand it to those unseen sequences, keeping the model from breaking on anything new. So let's pin down the 3 ideas that really define an N-gram model. First, the Markov assumption of a fixed window. Rather than the full history, the model conditions on just the last few words, which is the single simplification that makes everything else tractable. Beyond that, probabilities come from plain counting plus smoothing. You estimate everything by tallying sequences in text, then reserve some probability for the ones you never saw so nothing gets an impossible 0. Third, treat it as an ancestor with a real ceiling. It powered early speech recognition and machine translation, and it still shows up wherever speed and simplicity matter, but a small fixed window can never capture long-range dependencies, and that gap is exactly what neural models later closed. Alright, let's lock in the 4 things worth remembering. These models assign probabilities to whole word sequences, and from that they predict the next word, which makes them the classic statistical ancestor of today's large language models. Because full histories are impossible to estimate, it makes the Markov assumption, conditioning on only the previous few words, a bigram on 1, a trigram on 2. You estimate the probabilities by simple counting, then apply smoothing so that valid sequences never seen in training don't get a probability of 0. Though neural models surpass them, N-gram models still shine where speed and simplicity matter, and they make the leap to transformers easy to grasp. For more of these ideas made simple, swing by Standarity.com.